On November 6, 2019, I attended the University of Hawaii Board of Regents meeting about Mauna Kea, and after the meeting, after the heckling and everything else that was going on in there, it was pretty irreverent. On the outside, we got surrounded by a bunch of people. Lisa, who I was with, was hit with a cane by somebody in a wheelchair and was followed and harassed a bit. And I was confronted by Edward Halealoha, who invited us to a public debate at the university. He said in the next week. So I've accepted. I haven't heard from him yet. But if I don't hear from him, or if it doesn't happen, I'm going to respond here and now to his testimony on September 19th.
2014, the 600,
it's us.
the 600 million was paid in 2014, yet taxpayers are still paying tens of millions of dollars a year. That's what I'm saying.
For
nothing. It's already been paid. The settlement was paid. The payment was made. The settlement was agreed upon. The payment was
Are you
made.
willing to debate?
I would,
Just
absolutely.
me. Bring as much as you like.
Absolutely.
Just me. Okay, good.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
But
What's your name?
Facts. Halealoha Ayau.
Okay, well, I don't think my facts are incorrect. I think that the settlement was paid. Well, the payment was made, right?
Excuse me.
With regard to the Mauna Kea Access Road, they're absolutely correct. The assertion that the road does not belong to the Department of Transportation isn't just an assertion, it is a truth as a matter of law.
A few facts need to be established first. Who owns DHHL lands, right? First of all, that's a government entity that controls those lands. The lessees getting a lease does not mean ownership. A lease and ownership are two different things. Ownership grants certain rights. Like if you own something, certainly you can sell something, right? Well, lessees aren't able to do things that owners do with land. So they're lessees, not owners, first of all. But let's look at the Hawaii State Constitution, Article 12, Section 4. Lands granted to the state of Hawaii by Section 5B, the Amendment Act, and pursuant to Article 16, Section 7, of the state constitution, excluding therefore lands defined as available lands by Section 203 of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act in 1920, as amended, shall be held by the state as a public trust for Native Hawaiians and the general public. And the general public means, I would say, everybody, right? Especially taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer. DHHL and OHA both get my taxes for their budgets out of the general fund. And federal tax dollars goes into OHA and DHHL too, even after their settlement that was agreed upon in 1994 and was paid off in 2014. Still, state and federal tax dollars go to the budgets of OHA and DHHL. So I just want to make that point clear. And then, as far as let me pull up the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, Department of Transportation, and the Department of the Attorney General. They released a statement on August 30th, about 16 days after the original testimony of the AG office with Senator Kaikahele. So they clarified this on August 30th, 2019. The Department of the Attorney General, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and the Department of Transportation issued this joint statement regarding Mauna Kea Access Road. Mauna Kea Access Road is under the control and jurisdiction of DOT pursuant to HRS 26-19 and HRS Chapter 264. DOT has control and jurisdiction over all state highways, and Mauna Kea Access Road is designated to DOT State Highway System as Route 210. This includes any portions of the road that cross over DHHL land. Quote, State DOT has controlled and maintained Mauna Kea Access Road since it became part of our highway system in 2018, said DOT Highways Division Deputy Director Ed Sniffen. Quote, prior to that time, sections of the road situated on Hawaiian homelands were maintained by the county of Hawaii pursuant to a Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, between DHHL and the County of Hawaii. Beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 do not own Mauna Kea Access Road. Act 14 of 1995 resolved all claims concerning the use of Hawaiian homelands for public roads and highways built before and after statehood. In response to concerns that some compensation remains outstanding, DHHL and the Department of Land and Natural Resources, DLNR, have been working together to evaluate the terms of compensation to confirm that it has been made in full. This process, however, does not alter the fact that all claims regarding the use of roads and highways crossing DHHL lands have been resolved. Act 14 was a historic piece of legislation, said Hawaiian Homes Commission Chair William J. Ale Jr. It resolved long-standing claims associated with the use of Hawaiian homelands. We remain committed to seeing the completion of the few remaining items under Act 14, including ensuring that compensation for the use of lands and highways crossing DHHL lands has been resolved in full, or has been received in full. Quote, the state is reviewing compensation issues related to the use of Hawaiian homelands for public roads and highways and will ensure they have all been addressed, said Attorney General Clary Connors. The public is reminded that Mauna Kea Access Road is a public road controlled by DOT and that the current blockade is unlawful. At this time, DOT has restricted access on Mauna Kea Access Road to preserve public health and safety and to carry out its responsibilities under HRS Chapter 264. Now we're going to go into some more of his points.
I'm here in my capacity as a beneficiary, not as an employee of Hawaiian Homes, and those who cannot follow that, you got to work on that. The land is still owned by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, as was acknowledged by our chairman at the hearing before Senator Kahele. Number two, the only way an entity can exercise any kind of management authority on Hawaiian homelands is through a disposition with the department, one that must be approved by the Hawaiian Homes Commission. So if you're a lessee, that disposition is a lease. In the case of DOT, it would require a license agreement. So there is an existing license agreement, agreement number 676, and that is with the Department of Transportation, but that is for the easement, which is the Daniel K. Inouye corridor that goes through Hawaiian homelands, just that portion. So if you read that particular document, it identifies all the DHHL lands in the area. Unfortunately for the argument that this means DOT has operational jurisdiction on Mauna Kea Road, it excludes Mauna Kea Road. Excludes. So, you know, we're living now in the Trump era where you repeat the same lie over and over and over and over again. At some point, people forget it's a lie and they think it's true. DOT does not have operational jurisdiction of the road because they can't as a matter of law. So that's one way, right? If there's a disposition, there is none. The other way, which the AG is, opining, is by the operation of Act 14. So that was a law that was passed in 1995 by the state legislature after state agencies for practically since statehood was engaging in the unlawful practice of taking Hawaiian homelands without authorization from the commission and using it without compensation to the trust. That is not, an opinion. That is the result of the Federal State Task Force findings in 1983. That is also the result of the Governor's Task Force in 1994. Okay? So you had this practice of state agencies, oftentimes supported by executive orders of the governor, regularly taking, if you will, stealing Hawaiian homelands without authorization from the commission and without paying for it. The Mauna Kea Access Road is Hawaiian homelands. The University of Hawaii stole it from the trust by building a road over it and never paying for it. And they did so without authorization. They still haven't paid.
Now this is the problem here, is that his facts aren't correct. First of all, it has been paid for. Second of all, if you read the Admissions Act, this was for statehood in 1959. This is the lawful agreement for statehood that was voted for almost unanimously by the public. I mean, there was very few dissenters in this resolution to become a state of Hawaii. And so in Section 4 of the Emissions Act, F, 4F, lands granted to the state of Hawaii by subsection of this section of the public lands retained by the United States under subsection C and D and later conveyed by the state under subsection E, together with the proceeds there from the sale and other disposition of any such lands and income therefrom, shall be held by the state as public trust for the support of public schools and other educational institutions for the betterment of conditions of Native Hawaiians, and defined in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act 1920 as amended for the development of farm and home ownership on a widespread basis as possible for the making of such public improvements and for the provisions of land for public use. This was 1959. It was also reasserted in 1978. And that's what's in the Constitution currently. So if we go back to the Constitution, which is what I read earlier in Article 12, Section 4, it says this as well, that it's for public use as well as Native Hawaiian. So development of public roads and public use and all these other public functions, which is why apparently the public is still paying for OHA's budget, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the budget of DHHL in part. So something like $32 million was paid in 2017. 2016. And it varies year to year, but 23 million out of federal funds and 9 million out of public state dollars, the general fund. So roughly 32 million just for the year of 2016 was paid for the budget of DHHL, and then OHA got, I think, 8.6 million out of state funds that year. And I don't have budgets going forward of that, but I posted them earlier. So the public pays for the budget, the general public, me, I'm not even a beneficiary. I pay in part for the budget of DHHL and OHA. And so, of course, under the Admissions Act and the state constitution, the DHHL lands are used for public use as well. And, you know, it's very clear. It's not something that's hard to miss. You can find it all over our legislature, our constitution, and certain bills and acts that have been passed in Hawaii. It's not just for Native Hawaiians. So public use is also included in that. And he says that the land has not been paid for. Well, under Article 14, $600 million has been paid from 1994 to 2014, $30 million a year, fulfilled the settlement of $600 million, and thousands of acres have been transferred as well. And if you look at the books, I've got several here that you can reference. This is University of Hawaii Press, Who Owns the Crown Lands of Hawaii. This talks about the lands that have been repatriated. Also another one called How to Demolish Racism, Lessons from the State of Hawaii. This talks about several land transfers, thousands of acres that have been transferred in relation to this settlement. And there's roughly like 1,328 still in limbo. They haven't signed off on those or whatever, but they've been designated for years. Just a matter of getting the signatures. But yeah, nobody's using the land. It's been designated and it will be transferred. So taxpayers have been forced to pay over $500 million, $600 million, plus the feds and the state have taken land banks and transferred it to DHHL. So we're like 95% compliant on this settlement, and it has been paid for. And I mean, the only thing lacking is a couple of signatures right now, but there was no timeline in Act 14. There was never if this isn't done by 2015, then all contracts are null and void. None of that. There was no language in there like that. There was no date or no timeline, no expiry, you know. So there's nothing illegitimate here, which is why DOT, DHHL, and the Attorney General's office all, you know, came together for that release that I was going to find it, but the statement, the joint statement saying that Mauna Kea Access Road is in the jurisdiction of the DOT because it has been paid almost 95%. Not only that, but since 2014, after the $600 million was paid, every year after, the general public, the federal government, through their general funds, both the state general funds and federal general funds are going to fund Office of Hawaiian Affairs and DHHL's budget in part. So we're still paying, even though the settlement, the monetary part of the settlement has been paid. Tens of millions of dollars every year are paid to OHA and Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Almost $40 million between the two offices that are to benefit Hawaiians were paid out of general funds in 2016. So
here we have a situation where you have the presence of Hawaiians on a road that was taken by the state of Hawaii, through the University of Hawaii, and never paid for. Act 14 was intended to address that situation. And if you read the act, it itemizes all the different types of lands that the state took. Does anyone know what they assessed the value for those lands in 1994? The total value of the lands that were taken from the trust? Just over $1 billion.
Now I see this number of $1 billion thrown around all the time. I've never seen the actual legal assessment of these lands. They may be proposing that it's worth $1 billion, and regardless, what it sells for is what it's worth. I've known that as a real estate investor in my life. If I have a property, and even if I paid $2 million for it, right? If I sell it, if I make it a settlement agreement, and we do the land transfer, we do the real estate property sale, and I sign on a contract that I will take $1 million for a property that I paid $2 million for, I can't go back 20 years later and say, wait a minute, at one point I paid $2 million for that and I only sold it for $1 million, so now I want the other $1 million. No, you get, the value of it is what you sell it for. So for many years, about 20 years before 1994, there was proposals to pay $94 million for it and a proposal to pay $300 million for it, and DHHL rejected those proposals. What they accepted was $600 million. So regardless of whatever they say it's worth, like I don't see a reference, even here where they reference the different federal task force, like if you read this is on DHHL's website, dhhl.hawaii.gov. It talks about assessments and things like that. Never is there a value placed. So I don't know where they get this value from. Is it something they're making up out of thin air? And does it matter? It's like I say, as a real estate investor, you can't go back on a deal 20 years later and say, wait a minute, I paid more for that land, or that land was more valuable, or whatever. So why did I only get such and such for it? I want the rest. I want, what I feel its value is. You can't do that. Once the agreement is made, it's done, it's over with. And that's why, DHHL rejected other offers like $94 million or $300 million. They rejected those offers and they accepted $600 million. That's what was accepted, and that's what has been paid in full. And not only that, but they've gotten most of that land repatriated. So basically they got $600 million of rent for Native Hawaiians and the general public to use those lands. Native Hawaiians and the general public also use Mauna Kea Access Road. They all use it. Everybody uses it here, including Native Hawaiians. So, and that's what, the Admissions Act said it was used for, public use. And that's what the Constitution says in Article 12, Section 4. It can be used for public use. That's the law. And it has been used for public use. And it has been used by everybody, including Native Hawaiians. There's no harm. There's no foul here. Everybody's used that land, just like the Constitution, just like the Admissions Act stated it should be.
So, you have a state of Hawaii taking Hawaiian homelands valued at just over $1 billion. And Act 14 says we're going to settle this for $600 million. I was never good at math, but I can do that math. So the trust takes a $400 million hit. Yeah? If this was KS land, private land, and they took it, they would be subject to their exercise of their condemnation power. The standard is fair market value. So if they took $1 billion, they'd have to pay $1 billion. It was better to steal from Hawaiian Homes because they paid 60 cents on the dollar. Now getting back to Act 14, they say, the AGs is saying, the operation of Act 14 transferred all of DHHL's ownership in those lands to the state. Therefore, DOT has operational jurisdiction of Mauna Kea Road. That cannot be true also as a matter of law, because the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, which is a federal law, identifies the process you must go through to exchange land. And one key requirement of that is you have to conduct beneficiary consultation, just like what Kalani and Kepa said. You have to conduct, not, should we talk to them now? Have to. So, I have extreme aloha and respect for our commission, but we're going through what I call an identity crisis, the commission is. It's not quite sure who it is. And despite a lot of really positive testimony to explain to them that you're not like any other state board or commission. You're treated like one, but you are not, because your origin is in federal law.
So he says that the state agency, DHHL, is not a state agency because they're created by federal law. Now, as true as that is, state taxpayers pay for a large chunk of the budgets of DHHL and Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So if we get no say as a state or as the public of state taxpayers that pay for these budgets, then that's taxation without representation. And not only that, if we're going to go to federal law, we should use the U.S. Constitution as a rule, as a guide. And Amendment 14 of the U.S. Constitution says that you can't make agencies, government laws, or even private businesses that benefit one race over others. You can't do that legally. That's against Amendment 14. The 14th Amendment, is an amendment to dissolve racial discrimination. So with things like Kamehameha schools, where they only allow Native Hawaiians to be in their schools, right now there's not one single person in their schools that's not Native Hawaiian. And they rejected somebody in 2006, got sued, lost. Basically, they had to pay a settlement of $7 million because they racially discriminated against somebody. I mean, that won't happen elsewhere. You don't even find traditionally black schools like Browns or others that have only black students. They accept everybody. And so when it comes to a certain agency that benefits only one group of people based on racial ethnicity, that violates the 14th Amendment. So as far as what he's saying is, these beneficiaries consultations, I don't see that in the Constitution. I don't see that in the Admissions Act. I don't see it anywhere except for one place in 2009 where they made rules, right here, January 7th, 2009, where they made rules on beneficiary consultation, and that happened after Act 14. So I don't know what he's talking about.
Not state law. So if the state of Hawaii passes a state law that tells you to do something that contradicts your federal duties under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, you are not obligated to follow it. In fact, you have a duty to challenge it. Challenge Act 14 for being inconsistent with the following. 1, the federal trust duty to protect the trust corpus, meaning the land inventory. So if the state takes land from you, you're not required to sell it to them if they tell you that's how we're going to sell this. You get to say no. That's how you protect the trust corpus. Number 2, trust duty, is you have the duty of exclusive loyalty to your beneficiaries. Exclusive means you don't consider what the governor is thinking. You don't get engaged in the idea of whether science should supersede. None of that. TMT's issues are not Hawaiian Homes' issues. Hawaiian Homes' issues is only what the beneficiaries think. And if you don't ask them, then how do you know what they think? Which is to say, we're at this really critical point because, as probably we all know in this room, law enforcement is preparing for a major action. Here's the problem with that. The governor doesn't have authority on Hawaiian homelands, irrespective of the Hawaiian Homes Commission. That's the whole reason you have Act 14, right? The state kept taking action on Hawaiian homelands, irrespective of the commission. So if the governor is to proceed with this action, engage law enforcement to arrest kia'i on Hawaiian homelands, including beneficiaries, the problem with that is he would violate the authority of the Hawaiian Homes Commission. Only they can issue that order. Only the commission can. But the commission, for some reason, won't engage. And so this is my request. Please urge your colleagues at the Hawaiian Homes Commission to, one, avail themselves of all information regarding this case. And one critical piece of information is the commission acted in 1994, November of 94, and passed a motion authorizing the transfer of the lands for roads and highways, including Mauna Kea Road. But they prefaced that transfer of authority of their ownership interests on the state complying with the settlement. That was 24 years ago. The state never complied. The state never paid the $5 million they said they would pay for roads and highways, and they never initiated the land exchange. So after 24 years, the department is announcing now that the state is going to comply. As a beneficiary, I say the deal's off the table. The deal is off. It has to be off the table. How can 24 years later? So the language of their own authorization said, if there's any form of non-compliance, any form, then the commission rescinds its authorization and avails itself of all legal remedies. And I'm urging them, so they don't even realize that there is a standing order by their own commission, by their predecessors, on the treatment of these roads and highways, particularly Mauna Kea Access Road. And so I'm asking this commission, the Board of Trustees, if they would urge their counterparts at Hawaiian Homes to please just comply with follow your federal trust duties. Recognize that you are in a compromising situation because the governor of the state of Hawaii appointed you, but he's also now trying to exercise control. The commission has to be separate. There is no reason the commission shouldn't be in their position through a process similar to OHA's, through the election by beneficiaries, using only beneficiary money, not public money, so you don't run into the whole rice situation where the homestead associations select their commissioners. That's the only way we separate ourselves. And the last point I wanted to make is there's inherent conflict of interest when the attorneys that advise the commission are the same attorneys that advise the people you are on the opposite table of, DOT, DLNR, Office of State Planning. That is an inherent conflict of interest. Not to say these are bad people, bad folks, by no means. But they're in a compromising situation because they advise, they're defending the legitimate interests of the state of Hawaii while giving the appearance of doing the same for the commission. That is a conflict, and that has to be, the only way that can be cured is a law that requires independent counsel for the Hawaiian Homes Commission. So please urge your counterparts at Hawaiian Homes to step up to the plate. And you know the best way to obtain that kind of clarity of thought and courage to do that is go to the Mauna. Mahalo.
So in closing, since he continuously interrupted me when I tried to make the points that I made in this video, and he wouldn't let me talk when he confronted me, and he wanted to debate, but he didn't want to hear me, I just want to say that, if he wants compliance with the law, and he talks about how it should be with federal law since DHHL was created by a federal entity, well then we should also look at the 14th Amendment about the distinction between racial preference and general public benefits. If the general public is paying for benefits, they should receive the benefits. which the general public is definitely paying for the budgets of DHHL and OHA. And yet they're saying that, and it's wrong because the Constitution disagrees, that it should be only used for Native Hawaiian benefits. But the Constitution and the Admissions Act say differently. It says that general public use should also be acceptable. And it is acceptable, and that's why Mauna Kea Access Road is acceptable. Not only that, but, the general public has paid rent on that and has repatriated thousands of acres as a retribution for that. And, the $600 million that was agreed upon was already paid. Plus, since 2014, over $100 million more has been paid to those budgets of these entities, these two entities, DHHL and OHA. So we've paid our obligation as taxpayers, as the general public, and then some, as agreed to by the legislature, DHHL, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to, put my input in there. He didn't give me a chance to say anything I wanted to say. I'll play a little clip of what the so-called debate that him and I had went like, but every time I tried to say anything, he would say the same thing. He would say stolen land, stolen land, stolen land, stolen land. And that's not true. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Admissions Act of 1959, look at the state constitution, look at the amendments in 1978. It's for the benefit of Native Hawaiians and the general public, those lands that were put in a public trust. And the reason why they're in a public trust is because when the Republic of Hawaii gave a treaty to the United States to be annexed, the United States were obligated to pay off the debt of the Hawaiian Kingdom, which was monumental. At the time, it was $15 million. In today's money, that's worth $500 million, $500 million that the U.S. paid for to accept the treaty of the Republic of Hawaii to be a territory of the United States. So Crown lands, which no longer belong to the monarchy since the monarchy got dissolved by the Republic of Hawaii in the overthrow, since they no longer held those lands and the United States had to pay off the debt of the monarchy, then the lands went into the public land bank. The DLNR is what we call it now, the public land bank. And that public land bank was to be used for the general public. And because the 14th Amendment, which was established long before the annexation of Hawaii, said that there cannot be racial preference given in federal law or state law or any law for that matter, that we get equal protection under the law and we get equal benefits under the law. There's no racial preference anymore. We've dissolved racism with the 14th Amendment. So then that means that it can't be for exclusively Native Hawaiians. It just can't be. That's not how this works. They always reference federal law when it benefits them, but then they reject it saying, no, fake state, fake state, fake state. So pick and choose, you can't, it can't be both. It has to be one or the other. Is it the United States law or is it Hawaiian Kingdom law? And the United States is a fake state, because it can't be both. And if it's going to be fake state, then don't reference federal law because it doesn't apply in your point of view.
I just wanted, Ryan Thompson.
Ryan
Oh,
Thompson,
her
and
name.
Lisa Malakaua.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Malakaua, like King Kalakaua, but with an M.
Your first
King
name?
Kalakaua, but with an M.
Your first name?
Lisa, Lisa.
I'm glad the other side of the street is too.
That's right.
Malakaua. Lisa Malakaua, and you?
Ryan Thompson.
Thompson. And you're licensed to practice in Hawaii?
Practice what?
Law. Didn't you say who's your lawyer?
Oh, no.
Oh,
No, she just met me on my radio station. I have a radio
Local
station.
media, that's all.
Yeah.
Nothing, nobody.
okay, yeah. No.
Yeah, no, we're not important. I'm not
So
important
just so you know,
anyway.
in my testimony, I'm going to if you invite you to an educational public debate, because plainly, no idea what you're talking about. Well, let's let the public decide that.
I mean, do you agree that $600 million was paid in the settlement? That was paid over
For stolen
20
land.
years.
For stolen
Yes.
land.
Well, for used
For
lands, including roads and highways.
For
That's-
stolen lands.
But if I read Act 14, I'm seeing that it
For
covers roads and highways.
stolen lands.
But it was
So she
paid.
made it sound like you guys are
Covers
paying
roads.
and giving Hawaiian some kind of, unnatural benefit. No, the state of
No,
Hawaii
it's
stole
still
those
being
lands.
paid though. It was ended at
Yeah, it was
2014.
the-
The 600 million was paid by
budget ended
2014.
2014.
How much?
And they're
What
still
was the
getting
value,
paid
what was the
in
value of the
federal.
lands taken? Do you know? 1.2 billion.
What was the settlement? What was agreed
1.2
upon?
billion.
But what was agreed upon? And what was settled?
Lands and money. Where's the lands?
There's 1,328
Where's
acres
the lands?
that are being transferred.
Did they ever transfer those lands?
They've actually
They did not.
designated them, and
They
they
did
are
not. That was
transferred.
24 years ago. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I know that since 2014. Oh, ma'am, you dropped your earring.
$100
I know that since 2014, though, millions, tens of millions have been paid
Why
since.
Act 14 is to redress the unlawful taking of Hawaiian homelands by the state of Hawaii.
Up until 1994.
taking.
Up until 1994.
Unlawful taking.
And the settlement was
600
Paid.
million plus land exchange.
But not,
no lands were exchanged.
but not the monies
No
that were
lands were
after
exchanged.
2014.
No lands were exchanged.
Okay, but was
They
the
took
money after
1.2
2014
billion,
still
they took
included?
1.2 billion and paid 50 cents on the dollar. So don't stand here and tell us we're cheating taxpayers.
No, what I'm saying is
State
that
of Hawaii
the
has been
settlement
cheating
was
Hawaiians.
paid. No, what I'm saying is the settlement was paid by 2014. There was 20
600
years.
million for
Right.
1.2 billion.
That was the agreed upon settlement. Right?
600 million for 1.2
So you were trying to
billion.
renegotiate the settlement.
No, we want them to implement it. They
Okay.
never transferred the lands.
No, okay, but they're
They
still
never-
paying. They're
they
still
never-
paying.
No, they
the
stopped paying
600 million was paid.
It's done.
At
No lands were
2014.
transferred.
Right.
So stop saying.
No, so at
that
2014,
you're somehow being cheated.
No, what I'm saying is that in
If anybody knows
2014,
racism
the
and
600
cheated, it's us.
the 600 million was paid in 2014, yet taxpayers are still paying tens of $1 millions a year. That's what I'm saying.
For
For nothing.
stolen
It's already
lands.
been paid. The settlement was
stolen
paid.
lands.
The payment was made. The settlement was agreed upon. The payment was
Are you willing
made.
to debate?
I would,
Just
absolutely.
me. Bring as much as you like.
Absolutely.
Just me. Okay, good.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
But
What's your
but
name?
Facts. Halealoha Ayau.
Okay, well, I don't think my facts are incorrect. I think that
You
the
don't
settlement
even
was
know what your
paid.
facts are.
Well, but the payment was made, right?
Excuse me, just slow